Here's where I talk about resources I found helpful on the topic of Christian socialism. Hopefully you've watched the other videos in this series and you want to learn more. So first up is The Enchantments of Mammon: How Capitalism Became the Religion of Modernity by Eugene McCarr. This book is enormous, but it kind of has to be. It's part historical narrative, part critique of modernity's worship of the god money. And what's most striking is how McCarr exposes this notion that we live in some sort of a post-religious, enlightened, progressive era as a complete lie. We are, he says, more religiously, read slavishly, devoted than ever, but the objects of our worship are the market, so-called improvement, and unrestrained consumption. And our devotion to wealth is quite literally destroying the world because we're taking more from the earth than it can sustain. Now, one thing I thought was interesting is how he traces the origin of this false religion back to some very upstanding and religious people. Believe it or not, the people in funny hats who came over on the Mayflower, the Puritans. And he doesn't really have much good to say about them, unfortunately. For folks who want some shorter reads from a contemporary writer, check out the essays of David Bentley Hart. What Lies Beyond Capitalism is one, featured in the Plough Quarterly. And then, Are Christians Supposed to be Communists in the New York Times, among many others. Going back a century, I'm going to mention Herman Cutter, even though he's a little obscure. And that's because he had such a profound influence on the foundations of the starting of the Bruderhof. His book, They Must, is available for free on the Internet Archive, and in it, he is not at all shy about bringing the heat to conventional Christianity. For example, here's a quote: "The Bible is diametrically opposed to our Christianity." And here's another: "When you Christians say Christ alone, tell me, how do you show it? If Christ and Christ alone is important, why do you find it so difficult to start practicing his gospel, which overthrows mammon?" All right, then after Cutter, it's time to read John Ruskin. And there's more about him in McCarr's tome here. Ruskin's series of 4 essays, Unto This Last, is also very worthwhile. And one thing I didn't realize was how formative these writings were for Mahatma Gandhi. And you can see why. Because one of Ruskin's central points is that wealth is not a neutral force. So he compares it to a power, like electricity, that only acts through inequalities or negations. And he points out that it's simply untrue that everyone can have riches in a capitalist economy, because wealth actually implies power over other people's labor. What is really desired in the name of riches is power over other people. And without this power, large material possessions are useless because a person only needs so much to survive. So Ruskin writes, "Consider whether, even supposing it guiltless, luxury would be desired by any of us if we saw clearly at our sides the suffering which accompanies it in the world." Then here's a Bruderhof favorite, Christoph Blumhardt and His Message by R. Lejeune. Blumhardt was a German Lutheran theologian who influenced Karl Barth, among many others. He was one of the founders of Christian socialism in Germany and Switzerland, and Blumhardt believed that democratic socialism, for all its faults, embodied a divine truth. He saw God even in the so-called godless. He wrote, "The social movement is like a fiery sign in the sky announcing judgment. When Christian society sees itself confronted with this judgment, it should not be obstinate, but consider that a truth is being revealed." So this book contains a summary of his life, followed by 19 of his sermons, and it's available as a free download on plough.com. Final recommendation, something shorter and close to home, for us anyway. Bruderhof founder Eberhard Arnold gave a speech in October 1924, 5 years after the German Revolution, to a working class audience, where he talks about the nature of the anti-god Mammon. He describes it as work without soul, business without love, machinery without spirit, and lust instead of joy. It is a god of the present age, an interim god. And the speech has been condensed into an article entitled The Interim God, and there's a link below in the description. Actually, links to all of the resources in this video are in the description, and I hope you find them useful. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to the channel to see what comes next.